The Houston Texans 2024 season was up and down, so in this video we're going to go ahead and do the mock-off season for the Houston Texans. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. So the way the video works is we are going to be doing everything that the Houston Texans are going to be doing this offseason. We are going to begin with the team assets portion of the video, where we're going to be focusing on managing the finances and refinancing things to open up more cap space. Then after that, we're going to be doing the team free agent section, which is where we're going to focus on whether we're going to re-sign certain players or let certain players walk. We'll talk about some team needs, then we'll talk about my free agency plan, and then lastly, we'll be doing 2 3-round mock drafts. So as I mentioned, we are going to begin with the team assets portion of the video. Now, as of when I'm recording this video, they currently don't have any cap space open. They actually have a couple negatives in the thousands, so we have a little bit of work to do, but they also do have 6 draft picks to work with, so that is somewhat nice. So the first thing we're going to do to open up a little bit of some cap space is by handing out some extensions. The most obvious extension candidate is Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley in 2024 had an incredible season, and his stock is only going to continue to rise. So prioritizing him as an extension candidate was 100% the biggest thing I wanted to do to begin the video. I'm thinking for a contract extension, we're going to be paying him top dollar money. I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of 4 years, $96 to $100 million. But by opening up and giving him that extension, that'll open us up around $3.5 million in 2025. Next, I'm going to be extending Danielle Hunter on a small little extension, only a 2-year extension worth $48 million. By doing so, that will open us up an additional $14 million in 2025. Next is going to be Titus Howard, very similar to Danielle Hunter. It's going to be a short-term extension. In terms of the actual value of the extension, I'm not too sure. I'll leave that up to you guys. It doesn't really matter for the sake of the video. But if we were to hand him out an extension, that would open us up an additional $11 million in 2025. We're also going to be restructuring the deal of Nico Collins. To me, this one is probably the easiest restructure out of anyone available. He's young, he's still improving, his cap number is pretty big, so it opens up a good number for us. If we restructure Nico Collins, it would give us an additional $8.5 million. And then after that, we're going to have 2 post-June 1st cuts, those being Danico Autry and Shaq Mason. By cutting Shaq Mason, that opens us up almost $10 million, around $9.5 million. And Danico Autry, if we were to cut him, would give us an additional $5 million. So after all that, we went from $0 in cap space all the way up to 51.5. Now, do keep in mind that we can't give out too many long-term contracts because a lot of this money is just good for 2025. With that said, because CJ Stroud isn't on a big-time deal, we do have a little bit more of flexibility to work with. But all right, we are now going to move on to the team free agents portion of the video. And, well, this team has a couple of key free agents they probably want to bring back, but there's also going to be some we're going to have to unfortunately let go. In terms of some names, we have guys like Derek Barnett, Chris Boyd, Stephon Diggs, Mario Edwards, Kendrick Green, Neville Hewitt, Jerry Hughes, Deontay Johnson, Eric Murray, Jeff Okudah, Deshaun Phillips, MJ Stewart, and Robert Woods. A couple other players in there as well, but those were the big name guys that most of you guys probably know. We're going to begin the conversation off with Stephon Diggs. Now, I'm not going to be bringing back Stephon Diggs as much as I know that he's become sort of a bit of a favorite for a lot of Texans fans. I just have a hard time paying somebody like Stephon Diggs big money when he's already getting older, his production is starting to dwindle, and he's coming off a really bad knee injury. To me, it just seems like a big cluster, you know what, of just something that I don't want to have to deal with. I know our receiving core is already diminished with Tank Dell's injury probably impacting his 2025 performance. But ultimately, I just think that I'm going to target a wide receiver in this year's draft or potentially in free agency. I just don't want to get this older player in Stephon Diggs, who, again, I know a lot of people like. I know he has a good connection with CJ, but he's going to want a contract somewhere along the lines of 2 years, $15 million a year, which I just don't really feel confident paying somebody in Stephon Diggs, who I don't know if at this stage of his career would be the wide receiver 2 on this team. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and let him walk. The players I am going to prioritize bringing back, though, are Mario Edwards on a 2-year, $6 million deal. Rotational interior defensive lineman, has performed somewhat well. Kind of viewed it as somebody who was a bit expendable, but I wanted to bring back some depth in that position, so I brought him back. Derek Barnett on a 2-year, $8 million deal. Ever since he's been a Houston Texan, he's been somewhat productive. Now, he hasn't been incredible by any means. He hasn't been like all-pro, Pro Bowl level, but, you know, that's why you're not paying him to be that. He's just a really good rotational body. At $4 million a year, it's affordable, and it's a good contract. Eric Murray on a 2-year, $6 million deal. he was at times the starting free safety, and he was okay last year. More than anything, I would like to find a replacement for him, but we do have some young guys back there, so we can feel okay about Eric Murray starting if we need him to, but again, we probably want to find a replacement for him. Miles Bryant on a 2-year, $2 million deal, and Neville Hewitt on a 1-year, $4 million deal. Again, rotational bodies, special teams guys. That's really what I wanted to prioritize from these big class of free agents. So again, I'm only going to bring back those players. A lot of those guys are just rotational depth options or special teams players. I do not view those guys as being long-term solutions, hence why I only gave them a maximum of a 2-year deal. But after that, we went from $51.5 million to around $37 million in cap space. Still plenty of cap space to get a couple players in free agency, so I feel pretty good about that. But with all that said, let's now talk about the team needs portion here. Now, the biggest need that I think needs to be looked to address is the interior of the offensive line. Last year, the offensive line was a little bit of a mess, primarily in the interior side of things. They had to move around Titus Howard all across the offensive line from right tackle to left guard, right guard. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous. I felt kind of bad for him. Titus Howard, to me, is best served as the right tackle for this team. Laramie Tunsil did not have his greatest year, but you, of course, have to just suppose that he's going to get right. But Shaq Mason, I'm not bringing back. I don't feel confident in Juice Scruggs. Jarrett Patterson is okay. And then Kenyon Green has just been a complete disaster for this team. So the interior of the offensive line, to me, is my biggest priority. We have got to look to address the guard position so that we can move Titus Howard back out to right tackle. Next is a wide receiver 2. This was an issue that seemingly was not even close to becoming an issue coming into the season, but injuries just derailed this receiving core, and now it's actually become a legitimate issue. Nico Collins is an excellent wide receiver 1. He really showed this year that he can be the go-to guy, and when healthy, I feel really confident in a duo of Nico Collins and Tank Dell, but Tank Dell's injury was just really gruesome, and I don't know if this team is probably willing to commit to him long-term because of how bad the injury was. And when you're somebody like him who's who has a similar size to him, you are a tad bit more injury prone. That's just the truth of the situation. So I think we need to look to address another wide receiver body, whether that is in the first round of this year's draft or in free agency. By bringing in another receiver, I think we're kind of playing it a bit safe, especially with the unknowns of Tank Dell's injury. Now, I will say John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson showed some flashes last year, and I do think they're good bodies to have in your receiving core, but they shouldn't be your starter. They shouldn't be in your top 3, I mean. Next is the interior of the defensive line. Right now, you have an okay interior, but I think it could be a lot better. You have guys like Tim Settle, Mario Edwards, a couple players here and there, but I think this team would really benefit from getting a big-time upgrade in that position, like a true alpha #1 interior defensive lineman. Now, fortunately for them, I think there's some really good options out there in this year's draft, so maybe we potentially target one of those in the first or second round of the 2025 draft if there is a good player available. I think the edge rushers on this team, the front 7 in general, is really strong. It just would benefit from having some better interior pass rushers and maybe even a dominant run stuffer as well. Next is going to be a cornerback 2. Now, Kamari Lassiter, to me, can fill that role of being an excellent cornerback 2 alongside, of course, Derek Stingley, but I would like to find somebody who can also play within the nickel or also play on the outside. I would really prefer if we can keep Kamari Lassiter outside as much as possible. I don't really love the idea of him playing nickel, even though he can play the nickel. Obviously, you can move Jalen Petrie in there as well, but if we can find a more traditional nickel so that Kamari Lassiter can stick more to the outside, I would like to do so, but obviously, I want a player who has flexibility so that way we can keep Kamari Lassiter at nickel sometimes while also occasionally putting him out on the outside as well. And then lastly is safety. Kalen Bullock last year played more of that strong safety role, and I thought he was pretty good, but I would ideally like to see an upgrade within the free safety room because right now you have guys like Eric Murray, Jimmy Ward, and yeah, that's just not very good. So because of that, let's now go ahead and hop into my free agency plan. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I'll be really quick. I did start a brand new YouTube channel called Metro Stories. I think you guys might like it. It's a channel that we simply focus on stories of NFL players as well as NFL teams. So if you guys are interested in that, go ahead and look in the description below as well as on the pinned comment where you're going to find a link for that channel. But let's get back to the video. So in free agency, the #1 thing I wanted to look to address was the interior of the offensive line. So with that said, the big biggest contract that I handed out this offseason is going to go to Will Fries on a 4-year, $56 million deal. Will Fries is a younger player, 26 years of age. Unfortunately, last year he did deal with an injury, but for the most part of his career, he's just been really healthy and really dominant. Last year, in the 250 plus snaps he did play, he had an overall grade of 86.9, a pass blocking grade of 74.9, and a run blocking grade of 84.9. This is somebody who is one of the best players at his positions, and I do think that he will be able to stay healthy. It's not like it's been a recurring issue for him. He's good in pass protection, but I think he's even better as a run blocker. You allow him to play either left guard or right guard, it does not really matter. I think you're going to bolster up your offensive line significantly. He's a really dominant player. He's physical. Again, he's also young, so he fits your timeline. Just felt like this was a pretty obvious move to make. Next, I want to bring in a veteran in Brandon Sheriff on a 1-year, $6 million deal. Now, he's been okay these past few years for the Jaguars. I think the best thing you can say about him is that he's been available and not a complete negative. He's been pretty decent. And I think for this Texans team, I'm kind of okay with just bringing in a veteran who is just decent. Now, when I say he's decent, it's not like he's the worst player in the league. I think there's sort of a misrepresentation of what that word might mean. Because last year with the Jacksonville Jaguars, on over 1,000 snaps played, he had a pass blocking grade of 74.5 and a run blocking grade of 57.3, gave up 0 sacks and only allowed 2 penalties. Statistically speaking, this dude's been really good. Now, is he the dominant run blocker that he used to be, or the dominant pass protector he used to be? Not necessarily, but I do think he can step in here, be your starter for a year or two, and you feel pretty confident about your interior of your offensive line. So hypothetically speaking, after those changes, your new offensive line would look probably like Laramie Tunsil, Will Fries, Jarrett Patterson at center, though it could also be Juice Scruggs or somebody else. Your right guard will be Brandon Sheriff, and then your right tackle will be Titus Howard. I think your new look offensive line seems a lot better. Now, I still would like to add in a younger player in the draft, maybe with my first, second, or third round pick. If we can find somebody who can be that long-term answer for right guard or center, I definitely do think we should look at that. Next, I was looking for a more swing tackle type of guy, and I think I found somebody who I'm feeling pretty okay with, and that's going to be Justin Skule on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he played around 300 snaps, had a PFF overall grade of 69.2, a run blocking grade of 68.9, and a pass blocking grade of 66.4. Again, not to go into too much detail here, but he is a true just swing tackle option. This is somebody who, if Titus Howard goes down or if Laramie Tunsil goes down, you have an option at tackle to play at a decent high level. You obviously have Blake Fisher, but I don't feel as confident in him as I would with somebody like Justin Skule. Now I'm going to go to the defensive side of things, and the biggest thing I wanted to look to address was finding another corner in the secondary, and I think I found that in Nate Hobbs. Now, this is a guy who's going to primarily play within the slot, but also can go onto the outside if you do need him to in a pinch. Nate Hobbs is a veteran. He's been a decent player in the league for quite a long time. 1-year, $4 million deal. It's not a long-term investment. Your new look secondary would be Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, Nate Hobbs, Kalen Bullock, and Eric Murray, and maybe potentially a safety in this year's draft. The last player I wanted to bring in is a rotational defensive lineman because we let go of Danico Autry. So we're going to be bringing in Chauncey Golston on a 2-year, $7 million deal. Last year for the Dallas Cowboys, he had honestly a kind of a breakout year. He's been okay for the Cowboys his entire career whenever he's been there, but last year when he was given opportunities, he actually made the most of them, and I think he's only going to get better. 2-year deal, so you get him for another couple years, and you put him alongside Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson, Derek Barnett. I think you continue the trend of just having a really good pass rush. So to recap my free agency plan, we brought in Will Fries on a 4-year deal, Brandon Sheriff on a 1-year deal, Justin Skule on a 1-year deal, Nate Hobbs on a 1-year deal, and Chauncey Golston on a 2-year deal. After that, we went from $37 million all the way down to $4 million. That money can go towards special teams or just a couple rotational depth options. But with that said, let's now go ahead and hop into our 2 3-round mock drafts. All right, so as you can see, we are on the PFF mock draft simulator, and we are up at pick 25. Unfortunately, the board has not been very kind to us, and guys like Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden are all off the board here. Same with guys like Derek Harmon, Walter Nolan. So unfortunately, we're going to have to just probably go with an offensive lineman, which isn't the sexy pick, but Armand Membu's on the board here. I think you can stick him out at right tackle if you want him to, and then move Titus Howard back into right guard in 2026, or maybe you develop Armand Membu to be a guard, and then you stick take Titus Howard at right tackle moving forward. Gray Zabel is also on the board here, but I think Armand Membu is clearly the better player. Gray Zabel will likely move inside as a guard, and I think he'll be a good player, but Armand Membu, to me, has a different variety of what he can do. And because you have Titus Howard, who can just be such a flexible piece, I think Armand Membu makes a lot of sense. All right, we're back up at pick 57, and there's a receiver on the board here who I'm a big fan of in Jaden Higgins. 90.3 overall PFF grade, 3 really solid years of productivity. Very sure hands, 2.2% drop rate, 58% contested catch rate, receiving grade of 90.5, grade versus man coverage of 88.0, 2 drops all year, 8 deep catches, 29 slot catches. Somebody who has a little bit of some versatility, good size to him as well, 6'4", 215. Not necessarily a burner, which is fine, but if you hypothetically have a receiving trio of Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, and then Tank Dell when healthy, I can definitely get behind that. Some other players I will consider for this role here would be Omar Norman Lott. Now, Omar Norman Lott did not play a lot of snaps. It's sort of weird because he's such a good player, but at Tennessee, they just rotated those bodies so often. I mean, he barely had, I don't even think he had 300 snaps last year, barely over 200 snaps, but when he was up against a pass rush set, I mean, he was fantastic, but against the run, Tennessee just didn't trust him. And I think for a team like Houston, if you want to get somebody like that, it might be a little bit of a reach here to take him at pick 57. So I think I am going to ultimately go with Jaden Higgins here to give this room an extra body, and I think he'd be a fantastic player for this team. We're back up at pick 89, and I'm looking at interior defensive lineman again, and Deon Walker is in the board. Now, Deon Walker had a bit of a disappointing 2024 season, but 6'6", 345, can be a good run stuffer in the NFL if he can practice his technique. I don't think he's a surefire player in year 1, but hopefully by year 2 or 3, he can develop into being that guy. There's also some safeties on the board here, like Nick Emanwori. Now, Nick Emanwori, to me, is a bit more of a strong safety, more so than a free safety, which for a team like the Houston Texans is a little bit not what they need. Andrew Makuba would be more of that free safety body, who I think Andrew Makuba is a heck of a player. Now, he's a really thin player, only at 190 pounds, but again, at free safety, you're not going to have him going down there and making too much noise in run defense, though he is going to have to get his hands dirty, which he can do. Very good in coverage. I think he's fine in run defense. If I'm picking between Deon Walker and Andrew Makuba, I think I'm taking Andrew Makuba because I believe Andrew Makuba can step in day 1 and be a rotational body in your secondary. I look at somebody like Deon Walker and I think he's a bit more of a project. Some other players I do want to give shout outs here: Charles Grant. We talked about Deon Walker. Mello Dotson is also on the board here, but I think I'm going to go ahead and take Andrew Makuba here. To me, he's the best free safety on the board, and I do think he could get playing time pretty early. All right, but this is the first of our 2-3 mock drafts. Let's now hop into the next one. All right, but I'm back up now at pick 25, and the board went my way here as a wide receiver is on the board in Matthew Golden. I think that's what I'm going to go ahead and take here. Matthew Golden, to me, is an excellent route runner, very sure hands. His end of year for Texas was really dominant. I think he's a heck of a player who I think would be a fun fit next to Nico Collins. A little bit undersized, only around 6 foot, but I would probably say he's a bit more like 5'11", more than 6, but very sure hands, very dynamic player, very fast. You can use him in special teams as well. You put him next to Tank Dell and Nico Collins, I think he can be kind of like Stephon Diggs in some ways. Pick 57 is on the board here, and Shamar Turner's available here. Now, 2024 is a little bit of a disappointing season for him, but 2023 was really good. 6'4", 300 pounds. I would not mind that. Jared Ivey is also here. Now, he's not a true interior defensive lineman, but at 285 pounds, 6'6", I do think that he could potentially move inside to play interior defensive lineman, but 8 sacks last year. I just don't know if he's the run stuffer that I think this team would really benefit from having. Donovan Jackson's on the board here as well. This is somebody who can play guard, tackle, center, wherever you need him. This guy can do it. I've seen this guy get some first round buzz, and quite frankly, I think he's a much more deserving first round pick than he is a late second round pick. So if he's on the board here, I think that we don't think twice about it. You took your wide receiver in Matthew Golden. I think now you take your guards, swing tackle, center of the future in Donovan Jackson. All right, but we're back up at pick 89, and I think interior defensive lineman has to be a priority here. We took Andrew Makuba last mock draft, so we could hypothetically take him again, but I don't want to be doing the same thing here. Jonas Sanker's on the board here, but I don't know whether I view him as a strong safety or a free safety. Billen Bowman is also here, but if I back up on the pick, I'm probably taking Andrew Makuba, but since I want to take a different player, we'll take an interior defensive lineman, or Jamari Caldwell is here. 6'1", 340, run defense grade of 81.6. Not much of a pass rusher though, which I don't love, but you can see his grades versus Ohio State at 76.2, Penn State at 58. Ohio State, again, 61.2, Michigan, 72.1, Boise State, 68.7, Michigan State, 84. Pretty good PFF grades for that one. I think I might go with him. I don't think I've taken him in any of my mock drafts so far, and he could be a bit of a reach, but I'm trying to see if there's anybody else who stands out to me. Yeah, I think ultimately I am just going to go ahead and take him. Again, if I was to repeat a pick, I would take Andrew Makuba here, but since I don't want to repeat picks, we'll go ahead and take Jamari Caldwell here. There's also Anais Peebles, who had a good season last year, 6'1", 290. I just don't think he's much of more of like a run stuffer, which I'm really looking for. Jamari Caldwell, to me, seems to be more of that guy at 340 pounds. We'll take Jamari Caldwell here. All right, but this is the second of our 2 3-round mock drafts. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree or do you disagree? And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.